All right, excellent. I think we can go ahead and get started, Kevin, if you like.
Okay, amazing. Glad to get started. Okay, so thank you everyone for coming out to this amazing conversation. I'm sure we're gonna have great discussion. I just like to remind everyone to turn on their cameras if you can, so we can see all your smiling faces. And I also like to remind everyone that this meeting is being recorded, so just so everyone is aware. And so basically, we're going to have a well-rounded conversation, and we hope to get a lot of inputs, different ideas, into basically just what the future of education is going to look like. So first, let's start with an icebreaker, and we're going to do a Kahoot to get that started with. And I think Dylan will share the screen for that.
So if everyone has their devices handy and can log on to kahoot.it, if you have that handy, kahoot.it, and then Dylan will place the access number in the chat. Did everyone see that?
Yep. Good evening, everyone. The Kahoot pin should be in the chat. If you have any issues, please let us know. And we'll just wait for everyone to join before we get started and share our screen. Thank you. Thank you all. We're just waiting for a few more students to join.
Sorry, where is the chat button? Because I don't see it on my screen.
No problem. So you should see if you hover your mouse in the lower right corner of your screen, depending on the type of laptop or device you have, there should at least be a participants button and a chat button. Sometimes the chat is kind of minimized. If you click the chat button, that should display the chat. And I'm going to go ahead and post the pin once more. Hopefully you see a notification. Did you see it? Do you see it now?
It shows up and then it immediately disappears.
We can give you the pin. It's 275 1352. 275 1352.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
I have to say, I think Ian wins the background of the day award with his official, like, it's much better than mine too. Like, we all
I
should
just
have.
want to say we do it different here in Charles County.
I got it. Like, good to know.
Okay, so is everyone in the Kahoot?
Yeah, you know what? I'm going to actually share. We wanted to kind of hold off on sharing the pin before everyone joined, but we're going to go ahead and share the screen just in case anyone can't join. So if there are any issues with the chat, you can see the pin on our display page here. 1 second. Right, there we go. The game pin is 2751352. If anyone still wants it. So we are missing a few more students. We can get going if everyone's okay with that. We have 6 contestants at the moment. There's another one. Okay, I think we're going to get, Kevin, let's get started. I'm going to lock this in. And whenever you're ready, Kevin, let's proceed.
Okay, everyone ready? Let's go. Okay, so for the first question, Let's get it rolling down. What career field or profession do you plan on pursuing? So just type your answer. What career or profession do you plan on pursuing? And it'll just show up as you type in on the Kahoot. Got it. So we have medical field, we have government, STEM, public service, political science, public health, and computer programmer. That's very, very diverse career fields. That's amazing. And let's move on to our second icebreaker question. Okay, what is the one word that you would use to describe your virtual learning experience? So feel free to just type in as it populates. It'll be pretty interesting because I know how my virtual learning experience was. So I'm very excited to see how all of yours were. Different, challenging, tiring, strenuous, painful, hard work, flexible. So definitely encompassing a lot of the aspects of virtual learning right there. Okay, and do you have another Kahoot question moving on?
No, Kevin, just those two for tonight.
Got it. And then so those were our icebreaker Kahoot questions. So hopefully everyone got to break the ice a little bit and get basically to know a little bit about virtual learning. And so moving on, I would like to introduce our wonderful superintendent of schools, Mohammed Chaudhry.
All right. I think, do I get to take over now?
Yep, you do.
Well,
The baton's handed to you.
only for a bit. So no, I just want to thank you guys for making the time. It's very important to me that the department is really engaging, as I like to say, like the heck out of everyone. It's really important to me. We are in the middle of reimagining our department. We are in the midst of implementing a major education law coming out of a major world event in the pandemic. And it's a chance to, if there's one silver lining I say from the pandemic, it's a chance to do things differently and better. And we should be doing it better, because normal wasn't good enough. And I know you guys know this because you guys keep it straight. I had a great shadow yesterday of a sophomore in Calvert and learned so much. And so I really appreciate you making the time. So this is one of many other moments all throughout the year. And I'm hoping all of this will ultimately shape the direction of where the department will focus on. And we will publish our strategic plan, as I like to call it, in sometime in late summer 2022. Before we get going with the set of questions that I wanted to ask you, and Kevin's going to help me with that, I wanted you guys to introduce yourselves. So your name, your school, your county. So why don't we go ahead and, let's see if we can just, without calling on anyone, you guys can just go ahead and just make it happen. So actually, why don't we have Ian go first, since he has the best chair and background of the night. So there we go.
My name is Ian Hurd. I go to La Plata High School, and I'm from Charles County. And as I said earlier, we do it different in Charles County.
Do you want to call on someone?
Sure. I'll popcorn over to Boomy.
Thank you, Ian. So my name is Bima Masore. I am a senior from Arundel High School in Anne Arundel County. And as you can probably guess, I'm the ACPS mob. So I don't want to say we're the best county, but I think pretty much speak for ourselves. Sorry, everyone else.
You want to call on someone?
Sure, I'll popcorn over to Devanshi.
Hi everyone, my name is Vanchi Mystery. I'm a senior at Liberty High School and I'm from Carroll County.
You gonna call on someone, Devanshi?
Sorry, I'll call on Ezra.
Hi, I'm Ezra. I'm a junior at Polytechnic Institute, and I represent Baltimore City.
Great. Get to pick on someone.
And I'll popcorn to Hana.
Hi everyone, my name is Hana Oluni. I use she, her pronouns, and I am a senior at Richard Montgomery High School. I represent Montgomery County. I'll pass it off to Sam Stars.
Thanks, Hannah. Hi, guys. I'm Sam Stars. I'm a senior at Oakdale High School, and I'm the student member of the board for Frederick County, which I can confidently say is the best county in Maryland. And I'll hand it over to Tanish.
Hey everyone, I'm Tanish Gupta. I am a senior at North Hagerstown High School, and I am the student member for Washington County. And I'll pass it on to Kevin.
Oh, wow. Thank you, Tanish. For those of you who don't know, my name is Kevin Bokum, and I'm the student member on the Maryland State Board of Education. And I go to North Hagerstown High School in Washington County, and I use he, him pronouns. Thank you. I'll popcorn it to Emily.
Thank you, Kevin. I'm Emily Tedeschi. I am a current junior at Century High School in Carroll County, and I'm the student representative-elect on the Carroll County Board of Education. And I'm going to popcorn it to Macy.
Hi, I'm Macy Midovidlak. I'm a senior at St. Michael's Middle High, and I represent Talbot County.
Do we have everyone officially?
It looks like it.
All right. Why don't we go ahead and jump into the questions? Kevin, you are
Yes.
the moderator.
Absolutely. So for the first question, I'm going to direct this to, let's see, pick one. First person to see my screen, Devanshi. What excites you? What excites and motivates you about school, and what is the highlight of your typical day? And after Devanshi is done answering, anyone feel free to add on to the conversation as it goes.
I think just getting to see my friends again, my peers in the classroom, has been the highlight of this year, especially since this is my senior year. And I also have always really loved learning. Yeah, it's a bit weird. Some people think that's weird, but I've always really loved learning. And just being in the classroom, getting to be able to learn has been amazing. And that's what I really love most about school. I think the highlight of my day today, at least, was I got to head a debate club meeting. So that's always fun. I really love the opportunities that I get to do outside of school, extracurricular wise. So.
That's amazing, Devanshi. School is about learning, and we all like to learn as SMOBs. We learn every single day in our role. Okay, does anyone want to add on to that? Or we can just move on
I think another thing that I like about school, same with Devanshi, seeing my friends, but kind of tailing off of what she started, the clubs that we get to do, it wasn't really the same with COVID, because you didn't get the excitement of competing in person if you do competition clubs. My favorite part of today was at my quiz bowl meeting, my advisor told us that we got our first competition invite, and we haven't been able to compete since sophomore year. I think our last competition was actually Montgomery County. So, Hannah, I was in your neighborhood. And I just was I literally gasped. And my friends were like, Boomy, why were you so surprised? And I was thinking, because it's been 2 school years since I've essentially gotten to compete in Quiz Bowl in person. So it was really nice to see that part of school come back to normal.
Truly, being with your friends, competing is such a wonderful thing. And since you called out Hannah, let's direct Hannah with the second question. What aspects of your school community could be improved to benefit everyone? So direct this straight to Hannah.
Yeah, I can touch on the last question as well in my response. My favorite thing that I've taken upon myself to do this year is I have made it my absolute priority, my goal, to visit all 65 of our secondary schools within my 1-year term, and specifically to meet students, not just the ones who are in SGA, who are the captains of the football team, who come to our board meetings already, but the everyday average student who has no idea who I am and what the work I do is. I've made it a priority to visit them. And One thing that I notice, even in a county as diverse as Montgomery County, as we like to say so often, is that diversity is not equally distributed, right? So especially at our elementary schools where we have hundreds and hundreds, you'll have one elementary school that is majority white, very, very low farms rate, and then you can literally take a walk, take a stroll, 15 minutes, and find yourself in another school where 80–90% of the students are of color, and the farms rates are also up in the 80 to 90 percentile range. And because of that, we found ourselves in a situation where the level of engagement in that school community, the extracurriculars, the opportunities that are available for students can almost be predicted just by looking at these percentages and these numbers on a spreadsheet or on a PDF. And that's really, really troubling to me. And that is a deep, deep rooted issue in my county, in your counties, across the state, across the nation. And it's a really difficult task to address, right? I'm sure we all know that boundary decisions are some of the most controversial things that local boards can undertake. And one thing I hear really often, I think, in our school system historically and also at present is that it's not our issue to deal with these kinds of things, right? This is like a housing issue, it's a societal issue, it's an economic issue, and it is all of those things. But I also think it is upon leaders of the educational space to take upon it as well, right? If not us, who? If not now, when? To quote whoever said that, I think it was President Kennedy or something. But I really do think that demographic issues and taking a look at that is going to be key to solving a lot of our long, deep-rooted issues of inequality in school systems.
Yeah, I agree. So often we look at school boundaries and they dictate so many aspects about a school. They dictate financing, they dictate so much, and it can get so political at the end of the day, but it really does have an effect on students' lives, and it must be taken with great care. And why not anyone better to be a part of those boundary decisions than the student who those boundary decisions will affect and who they can relate to?
I appreciate you hitting on this topic out of the gate heavy. It's a very important topic. I often like to say, when I meet adults, I often like to say, where do you live and where do you send your kids school to, right? Like, who do you like to live next to and who do you like to send your kids next to when they're learning? And it says a lot just through answering that question, right? You know, because you're basically stating something there, right, around your values and what you want. And so I also like to say, you know, God did not create these lines. They did not naturally grow, right? They are man-made decisions. And so, but that's a different conversation. But I appreciate you hitting that. Anyone else wants to hit on this second question? What aspects of your school community could be improved to benefit everyone? Anyone else, especially in the tangible sense?
Oh, sorry.
Oh, go ahead, Ian.
The only thing I was going to add is through visiting schools, I've been touring my secondary schools in Charles County. And something I would add to the conversation is that perception is reality for these students. And the biggest thing I have noticed by visiting the schools and going and talking to the students is that the stereotypes and reputations of these schools are completely different than the students that live, breathe, eat, and work in those school buildings. And I have personally recently visited a middle school where the students are telling me in the same breath that they had 19 fights in one day, those same students are turning around and asking kids, can I take your tray for you? They're cleaning the tables. And yet the only thing the community hears is about this school has a fighting issue. But what we don't hear is these kids just have a lot of energy and our school system needs to do more to give them an outlet. And so they get told so many times that you're bad kids or this is a bad school. And all it takes is one adult to lift them up and give them that outlet. Why don't you help your friend? Why don't you clean the tables? Why don't you do something positive? And it was, you know, mind-blowing for me when I asked these kids and I said, is this a punishment? And they said, no, I just want to do something. I want to help. And that really changed my perspective on our work and what we're doing here as a board.
Appreciate that. Thank you, Ian. Language does matter, and how we talk about our schools and how we talk about our students and where they're at. It matters. All those words matter, and it does shape reality, or even a version of reality that's not rooted in everything else that you just described. So I really appreciate you sharing that. That's very helpful. There's a lot of conversation, and adults do feed into it. In fact, we feed into it in many different ways. We feed into it when we look to buy a house or things like that, or don't buy a house in that neighborhood because those schools are bad, and that's problematic. And rather than looking at the school and what's happening there, and are those kids growing, and everything else, looking beyond just the numbers, right? So I appreciate you sharing that. One other person was going to share. You want to go, and then we can go to the third question.
Sure. So, and this, first of all, I want to say beautiful response, Ian. I mean, it almost brought like tears to my eyes because I know it's an issue that a lot of our counties face. And one thing that came to mind when Hannah was speaking about her county, that reminds me of my own is people really don't have a concept of how someone lives on the other side. And I'm not just talking about socioeconomically. I think in Anne Arundel County, one of the biggest culture shocks that I found when I lived there was that if you live in South County, you have no idea what's going on in Glen Burnie. You have no idea what's going on in Severna Park. And especially because a lot of our residents have lived there for generations, they don't necessarily feel the need to find out what's going on in other places. And this has become a bigger issue as COVID has existed because especially when we make decisions about vaccination requirements, postponing events like homecoming, you have certain communities who say, well, no one's being positive, no one's getting sick. And me as a SMOB and my colleagues, I'm thinking, well, I get the emails of outbreaks on teams in the South County. I get the emails of students who are hospitalized, but they don't because they don't necessarily see them in their communities. And so one of the things I wish were better, and I think can possibly become better now that we've opened ourselves to using more technology, is connecting students with children and other students who are from different schools. I had the pleasure last year of joining different clubs that were necessarily countywide, just because I only need to join a Google Meet or a Zoom link, and I am still able to continue joining those clubs with kids from South River, Severna Park, Northeast, Glen Burnie, North County, what have you, because we're continuing using and utilizing those virtual options. And I would have never had that opportunity. I never did have that opportunity when I was in my 9th and 10th grade year. And so I think I don't necessarily like looking at the positive sides of COVID because I'm just pessimistic, but lending ourselves to use as virtual options to bring people together when we weren't allowed to see each other face to face has made it so kids who would have never been 20 miles away from the neighborhood can, in some degree, be that far.
Got it. So if I hear you correctly, you're saying you get to be in clubs in Anne Arundel with kids that are in other schools that you don't go to school with, but through the virtual option, you're basically able to be in the same club. Is that what I'm hearing?
Exactly.
Got it. Okay. That's yeah, I mean, if you kind of think about it, like, why didn't we do that before? Like, what was stopping us from doing that before? So thank you for sharing that. Let's go to the next question, Kevin.
Yeah, those are wonderful points, Boomy. Moving to the third question. Do you feel the way that education is designed in Maryland is best preparing you for your future college and a career? Why or why not? And if you answer not, what do you think could change within Maryland? So I'll toss this question to Christian, Baltimore County.
Thank you, Kevin. Hi, everyone. My name is Christian. Sorry for my delay. I'd actually say that I don't necessarily know if we're fully prepared for our college and career in the future. And I think one of the things with that is magnet programs. I think in Maryland, we spend such a large amount of our time on magnet programs and on kind of individualized career prep programs. And I don't think we're really focusing on the opportunity that high school has for us to really explore and to find ourselves in many different classes, like taking different specialized history courses or taking different foreign languages. And instead, I think we're putting a lot of pressure, at least in Baltimore County, on those magnet programs. And while they might prepare students for a career that they're interested in going in, as a student in a magnet program myself, I'm not going to follow through with this magnet program and the health professions that I'm in right now. So I'd like for us to focus less on those magnet programs and more on the exploratory nature that high school can truly be.
That's a wonderful point, Christian. Just really exploring like different diverse aspects about high school, but also those different programs that you were talking about. I'll actually direct this question to Hannah. I know Hannah on her board, I was just watching it, seeing all the different courses released by MCPS in terms of all these specialized courses. Do you think you can speak on that, Hannah?
Yes, I would love to. I will take any opportunity I can to brag about Montgomery County being the best county in Maryland and the world. We actually piloted our first LGBTQ plus studies course, which is the first of its kind in the United States, to be offered at the high school level, which is something I'm very proud of. I think while it's important to touch on lots of different demographic identities in all of our history, English, even our math and science classes, it's also important to provide students who identify as that identity or who are an ally to different communities to have an opportunity to specifically take a deep dive into a population that they're interested in. But in terms of college and career readiness, I'd actually like to talk about a different proposal that I got through my board, I think 2 weeks ago. My first resolution passed actually to include a financial literacy class at all 25 of our high schools, and then also make it a graduation requirement for students who are going to be matriculating into high school beginning the next year. And I did get a lot of pushback for that, because every time you add a graduation requirement, as I'm sure the state board knows, it becomes harder for students to graduate, right? That's another barrier added in the way. It's another restriction. But I really urged my colleagues and the staff in our school system to think about not just getting kids through that door, not just handing them that diploma, but thinking about what that diploma means, right? For you to walk across that stage and be given a seal of approval by your Board of Education, that means that your board has full faith and credit that you will be ready for college, career, and community. But I don't think that we can necessarily continue to say that when so many of our students don't have the basic life skills to succeed in society, right? So often I hear from students, I don't like going to school, I hate school, I don't want to come here. And I ask them why, and they say it's because they feel like nothing they're learning actually matters, right? They don't feel like multivariable calculus has a real application in their life, and studying Shakespeare's plays will never help them, navigate a real world job. And I'm inclined to agree with them to an extent, right? If we want students to be motivated to come into school every day, we have to give them a reason to be. We have to make sure that everything that we're teaching is useful and matters and is valued by them. And so that's why I think financial literacy education to me is really important. And I also think it's just an equity issue, right? Students who come from immigrant families, whose parents don't understand how the credit system works in the United States, there's no way that they're going to be able to succeed on their own either. So I think it's the responsibility of school systems to provide that education.
So financial literacy right now is starting with which freshman is a requirement? Is it the next class, or basically in fall 22 or fall 23?
Fall 23, the class is going to be offered at all schools in 22, made a graduation requirement for those matriculating in 23.
Got it. Okay. Anyone else want to take this question? Right. So basically, right, do you feel the way the education system is designed right now, you guys are going through it, you're juniors and seniors, and for those of you who are getting ready to make the jump to college or career, do you think it's prepared you? Why or why not? And if it's not, then let us know, please, why you think that. Anyone else want to take that on? There you
I
go.
would like to. I've kind of a point adding on to Hannah's and Christian's as well. In Carroll County, we do have the Carroll County Career and Tech Center, which is very similar to a magnet school, and it works very similarly in that you have a specific program, and you pursue that for either 1 semester or 2 semesters, depending on the program. But there's also the opportunity of internships, as many other counties have. However, I find that both of those options are very restricting on one's schedule. So while I do have interest in, for example, for taking this AP Spanish, my time is so limited because of the requirements in order to get into that program, and that the time that that program itself requires. I don't have much opportunity to fit in additional classes to explore, as Christian was explaining. And additionally, I think whether this is more of an in-class or a curriculum point, I think there needs to be more emphasis on the skill set that needs to be learned in the classroom rather than the material. Many students, once they leave high school, they don't know how to run a meeting and what are minutes and notes and how to take formal notes. While this might be something I learned and many of our other SMOBs have learned in various counties or in student leadership opportunities, not many of our students outside of student leadership get those understandings and skill sets. So things such as presenting to a group, or how to be comfortable presenting to a group, or just how to be professional in a public eye. I think sometimes such a skill set gets lost because it doesn't pertain to a specific course.
Do you think it should be a course, or do you think it should be something that's embedded in all content classes? Like, learn English by also learning this, learn math by also learning how to do this. Like, learn how to give a presentation, but you're also using it in math class. What do you think? How would you go about doing it?
That's a really great question, and I've honestly pondered that myself quite a bit. It's a question of, do we maybe write in a slim 3-day lesson on how to have civil discourse, how to dress professionally, how to present professionally, what a presentation includes. It includes icebreakers, it includes breaks, it includes discussion. So, one idea I've had is to include it in a specific curriculum, whether that's English, which would be most likely, or is that just a general skill set? That's a great question, and I honestly don't have the exact
And I
answer
love
to
that
that.
you led with how to have a civil discourse, because you know what? I think adults need that as well too right now. We need more of that right now. And so I appreciate you leading with. I mean, those were all very deep things that you can't take for granted, and so I appreciate that. Let's go to the next question, Kevin.
Yes, absolutely. When considering the future of education for your younger siblings and students that come behind you, what would you ask education leaders to change or do differently? What do you want them to know moving forward? And I know that Sam expressed interest in this question, so I'll toss it to him.
Yeah, thanks, Kevin. I would really love to see more mental health services integrated into our school systems, whether that be therapists or just improved social emotional learning. And many students agree with me when I was campaigning. This was definitely, I think, the top concern of students was they weren't getting enough support for their mental ailments or just education in general regarding mental illness. And it makes sense to me. We have nurses in the schools for physical ailments, so it seems right that we should, especially in a time like this, after the last year, we should have staff in the building for mental ailments.
Let me ask you something, Sam. So how do you? So we could add a nurse, we could add additional counselors, and frankly, we need more of them. And so, but say you add a mental health service or a room dedicated. How do you get kids to use it? Or are you making the argument you think kids are going to automatically go there, or you think there's a lot of stigma sometimes around mental health? Even there's also social and cultural issues that it's not always it's hard to even admit sometimes, right? If you're depressed or not. So what would you do to catch everyone? Or do you think just put it in there and people will just, if you build it, they will come? Or do you think it has to, how do you integrate that? I've been pondering that lately, right? I agree with you. I think we can't have, our teachers need to focus on instruction, but they're also becoming social workers. I often like to say I was a damn good teacher because I was a damn good social worker in Los Angeles, and that's not sustainable. And so, and I should, the students who were struggling, I wish I had a reliable system that I could refer them and count that confidently that they would take care of them instead of me, advocating myself for them. So what do you think? How would you do that? Or any ideas behind that?
I think that's a great point, because there certainly is still tons of stigma behind mental health and mental illness. And I don't know that there is an easy solution, but I do think to some extent just having it there and having it as an option and then advertising it once it is there would encourage students to go. And then I think as students go and they, begin to talk to each other and learn that it's beneficial, hopefully, that it would become more of a normal thing.
Okay.
Yeah. Actually, I'd like to extend this question, if you may, and Mr. Chaudhry, to Tanish. Tanish has been really big advocate for mental health in our county and has actually seen how our school psychologists are actually being overbooked. And I think he can talk more about that in Washington County.
Okay.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, I want to extend this not just to students, but also to teachers. I mean, just Tuesday when we had a board meeting, we had, I want to say maybe 40 or 50 teachers show up with the entire teachers union with this huge protest saying that they weren't getting enough mental health services. And then talking more about what Kevin said, like I think our school psychologists, like psychiatrists, they're booked for months. And if we have, and we don't, like the board is advocating for funding to the county commissioners don't pay us. We're trying to put mental health services in school. We just can't afford to put mental health services in schools. And they talked about how mental health is often like at the least like priority, where you have to pay the teachers, you have to pay central staff, you have to pay for the nurses, because if a kid gets hurt in school, then you have to like fix the kid. But mental health often ends up at the lowest end of that scale. And having these psychologists, having these social workers in schools, first of all, in overbooked counties like Washington County, it can free up resources to students. I mean, we have to go to private. I mean, Washington County says go to private places for your mental health services because we don't have enough school psychologists. We don't have enough social workers to cater for all of our students. So, just having those workers, having those employees in the first place is really helpful. Another thing is that if you have more employees, if you have more social workers, then it kind of helps to make it more normal. Like you can say that, oh, I'm going to this. It doesn't become rare. And students will say, oh, what, we have a psychologist? We have a social worker? I don't know we even had that. If you see their presence, if there's more than one for every 3 high schools, which I'm pretty sure that's how it is for Washington County, then it becomes more normal. And I've personally seen the stigma of mental health get lowered. I remember when I was in elementary school and I was in middle school, mental health was definitely more severe of an issue. And students are working to reduce the stigma of mental health. And there are groups working to reduce the stigma of mental health. But now I think the education system needs to do its part and increase the ability to get those mental health services.
Got it. So what I'm hearing is if you build more, they will come. That's kind of basically what I'm saying. I mean, to simplify it, but simply put, we can start by first having the resources in place, and then we can talk about how to tackle the how to get more people to engage with it. Okay. Anyone else want to weigh in on this question? If not, we can go in another one. The original one was, from a student leadership perspective, what are the chief concerns your fellow students have about their school community? So it doesn't have to be about mental health. You can give us another one as well before we go to the next question. Yep.
Thank you. I would say that building off of the mental health discussion that we're having, I think there are a lot of implicit restrictions that are in place in some of our schools, with a lot of maybe administrators that might not have any professional development that relates to mental health, or they might not have the they might fear the conversations about mental health. I know that personally in some of the schools, I've talked to students where they've tried to organize mental health campaigns or mental health awareness weeks, and they've been shut down by their administration because and they've been told that they aren't medical professionals, so they cannot talk about mental health. And that leads to another problem that I've been noticing is student extracurricular activities. I feel like there is a large inaccess to extracurricular activities depending on where you are in the state of Maryland and depending on which school you go to. I mean, there are so many barriers, from the inability to have transportation after school, where students might be able to have some of those mental health campaigns or initiatives being established, or not having any time throughout the day to have any discussions about activities or extracurricular activities. For example, how some school systems like Anne Arundel County have activity periods where students can participate in activities every single day for 30 minutes a day. And in Baltimore County, when only 3 of our 26 high schools actually have a program like that. I think there's a huge inaccess to those clubs that can be fundamental to allow a student to achieve. That I think every SMOB in this call today can say, because they were involved in those activities, they've been put in a position where they can run for SMOB, where they can become involved in this type of civic discourse and leadership. So I think we need to really focus on those extracurricular activities, because they can encourage student movements to solve and to address each of the problems we're talking about today.
This is fresh on my mind, Christian, because I shadowed a sophomore at Northern High School in Calvert, and so they're the Patriots. So they have a Patriot period, and the Patriot period is built into the school day. It's 45 minutes. You know, they have like 4 different lunches, but in the Patriot period, you can participate in clubs, you can go do tutoring. Also, if you're someone who is struggling, they have this like failure is not an option. So if you're not if you're not exercising the tutoring, then we're gonna call you in and be like, hey, what's going on? And we're gonna not let you drop the ball. And so the student I was shadowing, she participates in student government. And so we were in the student government. So we were in the auditorium, and they were doing student government. And then of course they put me on the spot and I had to stand up and give a mini speech. But outside of that, just the fact that it was built into the school day was a big deal. So it's like everyone is going to get it, versus of course a lot of great things are happening before and after school, but then you end up getting only a subset of students. And so I appreciate you sharing that. Kevin, you want to go to the next question?
Yeah, and so for this question, I'm actually going to direct it to Ezra. When considering the teacher who has had the most profound impact on your learning experience and academic success, what qualities did that individual bring to the classroom? How/why did that educator connect with you? And so I'm tossing it straight to Ezra. Feel free.
Thank you for asking. So this kind of hits home for me. Currently, my art teacher is actually in grad school for educational leadership, and he hopes to become a vice principal or principal. And I think, unlike a lot of my other teachers, he grades his work on effort and authenticity and really dives deep into the student learning. And I think that for me specifically, someone who struggles with mental health and is neurodivergent, art has always been something that allows me to express myself. And when I came across him, we had a connection and I found really safe with him. He went on to even create a cohesion planning group where he allows students to give input about what he's doing wrong and what the student teachers at Micah are doing wrong, and actually allowing kids to give advice and input to change our system, which is something that many of the teachers lack to do. They don't listen, they don't allow students to tell them what they need to work on. They only adhere to the administrative and their ideals. And the fact that he made that made me really happy. The qualities I would say about him are, if you seem down, he checks in on you. If you're late to school, he pulls you aside and sometimes will ask you, hey, are you okay? Did you commute to work safely? How many hours of sleep did you get? If you see him off, or he knows that maybe you dealt with something like depression next year, he may pull you aside if you mentioned it in your warm up and make sure that you're doing all right now. If I'm having a panic attack or if I feel really depressed and down, I've known that I can go to his room. I can spend time in his room during parrot time, which is like Patriot time. And he's definitely the teacher that I didn't think I would ever have growing up. I haven't had someone like that since like 4th grade. He's really made an impact on my education, and I'm really happy, and I really hope that he becomes a principal or a vice principal, because he's literally one of the most amazing people I've ever met. He definitely, I would say the qualities in him adhere to just listening to the students and understanding their input, understanding their mental health input, being super open. Every day in class we do at this moment in time or this day in history, where he goes over, hey, it's November 14th and this happened with the Black, Asian, Hispanic community, and why is it wrong? What is this artist trying to show? What are they trying to showcase? Maybe it's their fact that their family immigrated from like Colombia or Haiti or Africa. What are they trying to portray? What is your art? What makes art good? What makes art bad? Are you doing okay? How can I help you? What am I doing wrong? What is the studios teachers doing wrong? What do you want to change in this class? And like, how can I help you? So I would definitely say that he's my favorite teacher, and I really hope that I have him next year.
Ezra, really quickly, so you said something he grades on effort and authenticity. So I'm gonna like push a little bit at like, how would that look in a math class, and how would that look in a English class? If like, how would you, how would a if he was principal of a school one day, and sounds like he will be, I'll definitely get his name and make sure he becomes a principal.
I can definitely give you his
Yeah,
contact.
yeah, but if he wants to, and he's principal and he's coaching his teachers to grade on effort in the math class, because it's all becomes about points at a certain point, and you do ultimately have to arrive at a grade. What does that look like? What do you think?
Yeah, of course. So I think that's a bit tricky, and that's something that I've been working on, because I do believe that, for example, if you try to mark down and say, hey, I understand that you're working on something, I understand your effort, I'm going to give you more points. But then there's the kids that already have all the answers right. They already are at principal's list. And then you're
Mhm.
putting the same kids on the same level. You stop to yourself and you think,
Mhm.
who actually is there and who's not?
Mhm.
But are they supposed to be there or not? Because I think that when you ask me that question, I have to stop to myself and think, I'm not sure if I truly have an answer. Because if you think of math class, the first thing that comes to mind is, when you think you want to grade on effort, the first thing that comes to my mind is grading on the work that's there. If you have a question and it gives you a formula, and your teacher sees that you did all the work, and they notice the one issue you made in maybe part 5 of your work, they can give you almost full credit for giving your effort, for showing that you actually did it. If you have a test and maybe you did not do well on the test, maybe sending photos of your notes to prove that you studied, maybe coming to coach class to prove that you went through your notes and you went through your flashcards, coming to advisory to study with people,
Got
maybe
it.
talking to your friends and saying, hey, here is proof of notes that I took with my friend that we were going over our work. Maybe you could give me some extra credit points because you're showing that your teacher that you put in the effort. Maybe it's not the same level of grade as people that actually got the right answers. I'm not sure where I stand with that, but just maybe even a little bit of push to prove that you were on the right track and you were at least trying, if that makes sense.
That does make sense. Thank you for sharing some tangible example. It kind of reminds me, there was one year, and then I started doing it more and more when I was in the classroom. I was an English teacher and a social studies teacher, and I would allow few of the essays during the year, except the final essay, just because of time constraints. They could choose those if they got their initial grade, and if it was a C or something, they can choose to pick that essay and resubmit it. And so they could see that effort can lead to a better grade. And I was willing to update their grade on that. So, that gave them a chance to know that you are not just that C, or you are not just that D, or you are just not that initial grade, right? Because in the real, when we work every day, when we mess up, we get a chance to fix it, hopefully, right? And so it reminded me of that, just this culture around revision and effort. So I appreciate you sharing that. Anyone else want to tackle this question, right?
Yes, I really want to answer this question, and I was really excited because I don't want to say I'm unique in this, because I doubt I am, but I think I've been very blessed, despite going to wildly different schools throughout my academic career, to have some of the best teachers. So I guess for like a little bit of context, and Christian already knows this, I grew up in Baltimore County, and actually grew up the exact opposite way of Christian, so we would have never met each other. I grew up in the Pikesville, Randallstown area, and for anyone who lives there, at least where I lived, those are schools that are typically home to lower income communities, typically have lesser resources. And that's why when Christian was talking about magnet schools, it really resonated, because in the area that I lived in, if you did not get into a magnet school, you were basically screwed. I mean, like, just to put it simply, you were basically, and that's what.
Can you say that statement one more time? Because for the people in the back.
Yeah, in the area I lived in, if you didn't get into a magnet school, you were basically screwed.
Got it.
And it was hard, but one thing that I realized, because I moved to Anne Arundel County when I was in my 8th grade year, is growing up, I had gone to an elementary school that was more than half of the students qualified for free reduced lunch, 99% Black. And I didn't realize until I had gone to another county that we were lacking. And the reason I hadn't noticed was because of my teachers. They made it so that although we couldn't afford yearbooks, although we had classes that were 30 plus kids in a one floor school, I felt like I was in an environment that fostered my love of education. And it's honestly, it kind of makes me want to like bring me to tears because now that the perspective I had, we really didn't have a lot, but I had teachers who were willing to stay after school when my mom couldn't pick me up because she was working two jobs in Baltimore City. They were willing to, take their own money to give us snacks because a lot of students didn't have anything else to eat. I mean, they were willing to put themselves on the line to make us feel at home at school. And as someone who usually never had a ride home, I wouldn't have been able to do extracurricular activities if I didn't have someone like those teachers who were willing to work with my parents to drop me off at my house, who were willing to, I mean, just things like that to bridge the gap of the resources that we lacked. And those traits are things that I see, even though I go to, I guess, I don't want to call it better schools because those teachers made some of those schools one of my most cherished experiences in my academic career. But as I go to a school district that is a bit wealthier, I still see, even in the tinier things that we lack, like not having transportation, I see those traits in my teachers who are willing to sacrifice themselves to make me more comfortable, to make my learning environment more safe. And I think that's a charge that teachers have to put themselves on the line to make. And I think the best teachers are the ones who do it and don't allow you to realize that it's even something that's happening. And so that's what I would say when it comes to the teachers that have made the most impact on my life. Even when it comes to becoming SMOB, I would have never even ran if I didn't have teachers who were like, Boomy, you have to do this. Like, this isn't a choice. Teachers who are willing to read my application essays, who are willing to help me prepare for my interviews. I mean, just things like that. I wouldn't even be standing here before you without teachers like that.
Got it. Just really quickly, on this next question, I want to stick on this question a little longer. So what I hear from you qualities is, I mean, I'm hearing teachers who are going above and beyond, things that are not even part of the job description, but they know that's what it takes. And this goes back to, supports and resources and everything else. And I can tell you, as someone who went to 90% Title I schools and only worked at them, yes, that's what it took, to get it right. And just because of, all of the other challenges. But I want to push you guys on one other direction on this. Think about the classroom, and teachers use all kinds of strategies and practices. Think of one thing you like that your teacher does in the classroom in the way they teach, that you would want to say like, oh man, that really works, like when they do that. Like, and so all of you just think of one. Just, I like when my teacher does this during a lesson, it helps us or helps me. So think of that sentence, and I'd like everyone to give me one, because one part of my job is to uncover best practices and then spread it like wildfire. So some of the things you said, absolutely, what you just described is great, but some of those things sometimes depend on an individual character and human being, and it's hard to necessarily prepare someone to be like what you just described, right? We need to design systems so kids shouldn't have to depend on teachers like this, should be able to depend on community resource and a school culture that does that, right? But on the classroom side, we can coach teachers to become better. So I want to hear from you guys, what is one? So again, I love when my teacher does this during a lesson because it helps me. So who wants to go first?
I'll go first.
Yep.
I love when my teachers try to be actively inclusive in a lesson. And that means when we're reading a Frankenstein, analyzing Frankenstein from an LGBTQ plus perspective, which might not seem like the most traditional thing to do, but finding ways to include students' identities. When we're talking about history, analyzing it through many different lenses and not trying to stick to the traditional route. I think when teachers are actively being inclusive, that's what I admire the most.
Got it. Next person, or you want to call on someone since we're doing popcorn style before?
Sure, I'll call someone. Macy.
Personally, I really love when my teacher, like I'm I need to hear it, but I also need to see it. Like if you just say something, I'm probably not going to obtain it. So, one teacher that comes to mind specifically, she puts it on the board, she reads it out loud, and then she individually makes sure each person understands it. And she's not the type of person to ask you and then just walk away. She makes sure you don't get it. And if you don't, she doesn't make you feel like you're dumb or like your question is irrelevant. She's there to listen and she's actually there to help you to understand the material. So I just love when my teacher makes sure I understand what she's teaching me.
Got it. You want to call it?
I'll go to Kevin.
I would generally say whenever I guess I have this math teacher, he's really appreciative. And the thing I do admire the most that he does is that he has extended office hours from even before school starts, starting at 7 a.m., going even until 8 p.m. He always makes himself available for a student, whether they have any questions or anything going on, whether he just wants to talk or do anything. And Mr. Chody kind of talked about it, almost teachers having to play the social worker role, or when they do play it, it definitely aids in the educational environment. And whenever you develop that connection, it's just such a profound impact.
Okay, the next call on someone else. I really want to hear from everyone on this piece, on the classroom.
Yeah, Hannah.
I love when my teachers recognize that their classroom does not exist in a bubble. And what I mean by that is through an example. Last year when there was the shooting in Georgia, where 8 Asian American women were killed, my family is Asian American, and I did not expect it to take the toll on me that it did. I didn't really understand the depths to which current events, things happening outside my community, things happening in the world could affect my mental state and honestly, like prohibit my ability to learn. And I had one teacher in particular at the very end of the day, after not talking about it at all, after it barely being addressed, if at all, by any sort of adult in the building, I had one teacher who reserved 10, 15 minutes of time to just debrief and allow students an opportunity to just express how they felt and how they were feeling and how it was impacting them. And just being able to talk openly about it made my learning experience a lot better and also made our connection a lot more genuine.
Got it. What are you going to call on?
Devanshi.
So I also have this amazing math teacher, and what I appreciate the most about being in his classroom is that he maximizes the instruction time, in that he combs through all the material, puts everything in plain terms, and doesn't treat an AP class as something that only top students can pass. But then after he uses the instruction time as much as possible, he also leaves some time at the end where we can where he gives the choice to us. We can go over practice problems, we can finish up some of our homework, or he can put on a fun math-related movie for us. Like we watched Gravity over a couple of days last year. So just having that choice and freedom in the classroom to not only seek out help, but also get access to some of the applications of what we're learning has been phenomenal. And that's the quality that I appreciate most.
Got it. It's 6, but I'm gonna hang out, guys. I can stay here till 6:30. But if you have to go, I totally understand. But those of you who do hang out, I do have a couple of other things, and I want to give you a chance to ask me questions. But so just as a heads up, just in case, I don't want your parents to get mad at me that I kept you from something. So, but if you want to hang out with me, I'm gonna hang out here till 6:30. So we have some time. So who do you want to pick on next, Devanshi, that we haven't heard from on this question?
Let's go to Tanish.
So I feel like there's a trend of math teachers, but I also had this really great math teacher all the way back in 8th grade. And one policy that she had was that you could do any corrections that you wanted. I think besides some tests, any corrections that you wanted, you can get 50% of your grade back. And I think that really forced a lot of students to know that if I want to get a higher score on this test, if I want to get a higher score in this class, I need to actually go back and relearn the material. Because one thing I really see is that, and this happened, I remember this happening in my physics class a lot, where a lot of kids didn't understand the material, they had the test, and they just immediately forgot about it. What happened, and then he also started offering corrections too, which is that when you offer corrections for something like 50% of the grade, students will go back and they'll actually try to relearn the material or learn the material that they didn't know previously.
Okay.
And I'll pass it on to Bhumi.
So one thing, and this will obviously differ from different schools, but I'll just speak on my school. In recent years, there's been a more heavily focused, I guess, incentivized approach on having students teach teachers, having students play educators, because when it comes to what it's like to be a student in this year, this time and age, only the students can really answer those questions. And so, kind of piggybacking off of what Hannah had, over my junior year, I had been working to point out different types of worldly issues that were previously, let's say the shooting of someone like Philando Castile. We would never talk about that in class. But to me, obviously, as an African American woman, I'm thinking I'm watching someone day in and day out who looks like my brother, looks like my father be murdered, and then I have to go to calculus the next day and pretend everything's normal. And so I worked with my principal to create this initiative where students could have these conversations during class time. We used to do it in our version of, I think you called it Patriot Hour. We call it Wildcat Hour or Pride Period. But what I noticed, teachers, not just the ones that I liked, but teachers that had differing opinions that I did ideologically, they would take time out of their day, which I know teachers don't have a lot of time, to come and visit these student-led conversations. They would come and visit when we would talk about things like in our community, in Deal, there was a viral video of a man being violently accosted by the police. And we have many students who have family that live in that area, who know how infamous that area is, quite frankly. And so that affects them. We have conversations about that. My principal, she's like a saint, Miss Davenport. After the January insurrection happened, she emailed all of our staff that they had to end class about 15 to 20 minutes early so that each class could talk about what happened. Because something that, quite frankly, will probably be in history books one day and our children have to learn about, shouldn't be something we ignore in the interest of whatever, trying to maintain the facade of this is school and that's real life. And so I thought it was really nice to have teachers actually hear from us about our thoughts. And when they voluntarily do it, it means even more because, we have staff PDs. I don't know if you all have this, we have like Project Unity Day, so equity PDs. But when teachers show that they actually want to learn, when they go to book studies in their own time, when they take the initiative, it makes a difference, especially to us students who take the time to organize and have real stake in those issues.
Got it. So the strategy, I'm gonna say that because she wins the award for being the most deep person today. So it's hard to follow her. But is that the strategy that I'm taking away from you is when teachers let students teach, and that's what I'm hearing, during certain moments throughout the year. Who do you want to call on next?
Let's see. I don't know, a lot
Kevin.
of people have been called on. Ian?
Thank you, Bhumi. So I've been thinking hard about this, and I've had quite a decent chunk of time here to think about it. And the best way I can verbalize it is when time is not a number. There are just these very specific teachers who are flexible with their lesson plans. Whenever we hit a soft spot in the curriculum or something where students are trying to tie in an outside experience or like many other SMOBs have said, personal experiences or feelings or sentiments, they stop the lesson. And they understand that staying on their lesson plan is not as important as growing these students, having this mature discussion, and ultimately being able to come to a consensus with their class. And to add on to that, it's those same teachers who I believe it was Kevin, who said that he has teachers who stay after school until 8 p.m. It's those same teachers where time is just not a construct for them. Their life is breathing life into students. And there's nothing we can do to ever pay the debt we owe these teachers, but the least we can do is recognize them, honor them, and try to build other teachers up to their level of understanding, empathy, and commitment to learning.
Got it. Who's next? Who are you calling on?
Has Emily gone?
Nope.
No, I have not, so I can go ahead. So mine's actually very similar to yours, Ian, so thank you. Two teachers in particular come to mind when you ask this question. They've opened a lot of flexibility up to the class, and by that I mean we've worked on projects, even homework. There's been a few times where there has been miscommunications on what has been due because it was put in the Google Classroom, but not everybody saw it, etc., etc. But these teachers, they understand, they say, okay, let's start with 15 minutes. How are we doing then? And instead of saying at 15 minutes, if you aren't completed, you should have done a larger portion of that work at home. They add on time as needed. And for one example, my one teacher actually integrated a warm-up that is looking up current events and researching current events, which in itself I praise because we don't have selected time to do that. So it's really dependent on the students. So I think, opening that up to everybody is a great idea. But additionally, she originally slated 15 minutes for this project. And then 15 minutes go by and she said, I see you all are looking really deeply into these issues and are genuinely interested. So she then gave us the entire 1 hour and 20 minutes to complete that. And so both her and my other teacher who have, just integrated that flexibility, particularly after last year, where there was a lot of flexibility with deadlines and what actually needed to be done, what work was required. Those little details of flexibility are really powerful in understanding the students and incorporating the students' needs into the classroom. And it just shows that the class goes beyond what the material is, the material timeline. It's about actually researching or completing the work and understanding that students have extracurriculars and sports outside of school. So giving some flexibility and bend to that.
Got it.
And I will pass it to Ezra.
Thank you, Emily. So I wanted to kind of relate it to what Hannah and a couple of the other SMOMs were talking about. I think that one of the amazing things that teachers do is incorporate learning about those demographic and prejudice and racial issues that are in our world and nation, and just allowing us to understand that although math is important, shootings and fights and all of these other issues are also prevalent. I remember growing up as a bicultural person, I almost never felt that represented in school. Plug in my computer. I never felt that represented in school because no matter if it was on one of those surveys where they would make you pick your ethnicity, and that always made me stressed. When I came to my art class, I had my first Jewish teacher, and he cannot help that he's Jewish. That has nothing to do with him, but it was still that connection that I had. I've never had that connection. I never could ask someone how to write something in Hebrew. I never could ask someone, what did that experience in Poland resonate with you? My family escaped from the Holocaust, and I never could talk to any of my teachers about it in the same way that I can talk to him about it because I never had that connection. And I remember we're doing I think this technically isn't really a teacher, but my student teachers, I think that one of the most amazing things I can do is when teachers allow us to make a project that gears to our identity and our likings. When a teacher says, hey, you can do a science project and you can make it about your favorite part of science. You can do an art project about your culture and your identity. Currently, I'm doing an art project about my culture, and it's the first time I've ever been able to express this identity that I don't think many people understand, and that being bicultural in Baltimore, especially an area of redlining where my parents could not have lived even like 40 years ago or 60 years ago, is something that I never thought would happen until I got the opportunity. And I think that incorporating that into the lesson and being, hey, my family went through that stuff too. My mom is from Poland. I have that same connection, and I'm going to allow you to make it in your art. And I just think that's like really beautiful, and it's really vulnerable for me too. I don't like talking about it, but my family did escape the Holocaust, and I'm not proud of it, but I'm really happy that I got the opportunity to share it in our piece.
Appreciate that. I many times for many of my students, I was the first Muslim person they've ever met. And you know, my name's Mohammed. My middle name, I have two of them. It's Mohammed Ali Omar Chaudhry. So definitely screams Muslim there. And so, you know, they would have different assumptions of it, and I could have reacted differently, but I was literally the first Muslim that they met that they did not see in a really bad Hollywood movie with stereotypes or other things or things in the news. And you know, it was important to take moments to explain and who I was and what we believe and things like that. And so and how I believe, right? And so which sometimes is not the same as my parents, which drives them crazy, but that's okay. They still love me. But outside of that, I appreciate you sharing that. And did we get everyone, Kevin?
Yeah, it looks like we got everyone. Does anyone?
I think the next person we can go to we were gonna explore topics around mental health, but we hit that topic already. So yeah, so the next one is, why don't you go ahead, and it's basically a round where you can ask me what you want to ask me, and so Kevin can moderate.
First, you have a question in mind, right, Mr. Chaudhry?
What's up?
I think first you have a question in mind.
I'll say my question at the end, but I don't want to lose time for them to ask me a question, even if I lost time to ask mine.
Yeah, so feel free, smobs, to ask any question you'd like of Mr. Chaudhry. Please keep it civil, of course, but if anyone wants to go ask a question, feel free, and I'll call on whoever's hand I see first. Any questions? Oh, Tanish?
Yeah, I had a question, and this is like kind of specific, and this is just conversations with my board members. So I believe, and this is specifically relating with Kerwin, that Kerwin funding is mostly focused on state matching, where the county matches, or where the state matches what the county pays. One of the problems that we have, like a really big problem, is that our county commissioners pay us like the absolute minimum they can every single year, and we can barely like sustain our school system. Like everything is this close to falling apart all the time. So like, how are we supposed to implement Kerwin when we literally don't have the money to like get matched?
No, that's a good question. That's a very deep adult debate oriented question. So there's a couple things depending on which aspect of the blueprint law you're talking about, right? The state will give its share, right? Depending on the wealth of, you know, of your county and what that looks like. And, you know, it looks at, you know, the property wealth and all these other things that go into it. But however, for example, it'll figure out the share that, you know, the equation will lead to, like, your county owes this much as part of this initiative, and the state will fork over that portion. And that portion can vary. It could be 60% county, 40% state. So it depends, right? But the Kerwin does also require, the blueprint law requires the counties to also step up. It does actually require them to formally step up. So there's some teeth behind that. Now, are some people going to go down quietly? No, they're not. You know, there was drama around just even getting it passed, right? So, so just so you know, around that, every county will have to basically increase their commitments, as well as the state increasing its commitments. There's something called maintenance of effort that basically means that, you know, you can't cut, right? You can't go backwards, right? You must grow. And so we recently got assurances from all the school systems around that. So that's how it would work. And so there is teeth behind, like, hey, you do need to commit to your share. But yes, people will fight over that, but you know, it is the law. And so, but easier said than done. So just so you know that.
So just to be clear, so the maintenance of efforts will be hired.
Yes, because depending on the initiative though. So what is the initiative? Are we talking about the teacher pay, right? Remember, it's moving teacher salaries to 60,000. Are we talking about bringing more accomplished teachers to low performing school and giving them additional bump? Okay, what's your share versus others? It depends, yes. So that is correct.
Got it. And also, Mr. Chaudhary, we have been having questions from YouTube. And so we have students watching on YouTube too. And so
Yep.
we would like to answer, I'll have you answer one of their questions.
Yeah,
So,
we can mix it up between the room and the world outside.
so Destiny and Michelle have been commenting. Destiny submitted her experiences during the pandemic, and we thank her for sharing them with us. She has concerns about the platform Brightspace, which is a learning management system, and also as well as COVID policies and vaccines, specifically the requirement for athletes to be vaccinated.
Mhm.
Would you like to speak on that?
So Brightspace, I can't speak on Brightspace because I don't know much about Brightspace. I know about other learning management systems like Canvas, and there's many others. So I'll have to look into what that specific matter is, because it's all learning management systems have specific qualities. There's no such thing as one being the best, but there is qualities that make them strong, right? So I would have to see what that is. So I'm happy to, follow up or have her follow up with you, and we can look into that, and I can speak to the superintendent to find out what challenges might be. And on the vaccine front, that's a challenging one, right? So I imagine, we know that we got to keep our everyone safe. We know the research is strong around vaccinations, and I know some of the school systems have decided to say you either have to get vaccinated in order to play, or you have to get vaccinated or do testing. I think it's either or I've seen. So I would have to see it. I myself personally can't make a rule on that. It's not something within the purview of the department, but I can understand the challenges around it, right? Like, if you're an athlete and you're not vaccinated, but your team is, and you're in a huddle and you pass it on, and yeah, there might be a low rate of getting sick, but is it worth even just one person getting sick, right? And so that can impact the team. So there's a lot of things you want to think about there, but again, in terms of what can the state soup do, right? I can definitely help guide conversations, but in terms of making a rule to say, stop doing that, that's something I would ask you to have that conversation locally. And that's something also our health department can also get involved in.
Yeah, amazing answer. Does anyone have any questions here in the room?
I have a question.
Yep, Ian?
So this kind of ties in, we're talking big picture. We have all these problems. We want to fix them. And so my question to Mr. Chaudhary is, on the state board, but also with us being on local boards, how do you balance making mandates and adding to that workload of teachers and everything they're required to do? And how do you balance that with the success we want to achieve and where we want to go?
Mhm. Well, so depends on what the mandate is or what the rule is, right? If the rule is make sure kids who are struggling in reading out of the gate in kindergarten and first and second grade, and you have to give them all kinds of supports and intervention and show their families evidence that you are giving that, I'm okay with that rule. Now, you can choose to implement it in unique ways, but I don't want to give systems a pass for kids who are struggling. And it can't be just dependent on all the amazing teachers you guys tonight we clearly built the model teacher based on everything you guys threw out, right? But not all teachers have those qualities, but we can coach up people. But I think how do you balance that's part of my job, right? I'm gonna have to engage the heck out of people, understand what the needs are, understand what it looks like existing, what do teachers already do, and can it work within what they already do? What do districts already do? Does it require more teeth and accountability, or does it require more support or resources because it's an unfunded mandate? Because sometimes there's such thing as unfunded mandates, right? Like you want schools to do this, but at the same time, you have not given them adequate funding. So it really depends on what that is. You know, there's an expression sometimes, you know, you won't be loved by all when you make the decision, but did you get it right, ultimately to get more kids learning and more teachers supported? But whatever comes down, you know, if teachers have to implement it, there needs to be support structures in place. That's why I'm a big proponent of giving teachers planning time during the school day, not after school, before school. Build it into the school day, right? Like I mean, teachers are conducting brain surgery every day, not literally, but they are. I mean, that's literally the job, and they need planning time, and they need to work with their colleagues and think about, you know, how to refine this lesson. And it should be during the school day, as it's described as job embedded professional development. So that's how I would go about how to balance some of these things.
Great. And if we could just turn it to some of the pre-submitted questions. I'd just like to turn it to a question from Haley from Garrett County. She asked, is there anything that MSDE is working on to help close the gap between students learning in quarantine and in the classroom?
So is there learning in quarantine? Well, we recently worked with our Department of Health to modify quarantine rules to have less students quarantining. So hopefully your county is exercising that modification so we can have less students. On the quarantine front, you know, we recently published guidance, and we gave guidance to school systems on what should be the minimum expectations or the floor. Sometimes I like to describe, like, the department should always be able to define what's the floor for excellence, right? Like, there shouldn't be a mystery around that. And so we recently gave guidance around that, making sure when students are in quarantine, within that week, they have direct contact with multiple adults, making sure they have access to actual assignments, making sure they have access to a device that works, all those kinds of things, and making sure there's a tutoring opportunity or a support opportunity. And so hopefully all those things are being true. Of course, just like anything, people are implementing it on varying levels. So that's what we've done recently. But the big one that we did is we published the modified guidance to quarantine folks less while also ensuring safety.
Got it. And then another question is from Kiana from Montgomery County. She asked, can you talk about the disconnect regarding information provided to students about education options?
That's a deep question. So what I'm hearing is, well, first I would say she should go to Hana and find out what is missing. So advocate to your board always, you know. And it seems like what I'm hearing is information is not being given to all students throughout the county in the same manner, and it looks different. Well, I mean, Hannah said just within blocks of several schools, there's two different worlds. And so, so I could see some of that playing out, but I would want to know more about the specific issue that would help, right? Because the question is so broad, like information, like what information about college options, about scholarships, about, you know, being able to, you know, counseling services, what is the information? So I would need to know more about it. But you do have a student board member, start there, and you know, and then we can go from there.
Got it. And I think Boomy, are we raising your hand? Did you want to say
Yeah, I am. I had a question that I think is more specific to us as board members. So I guess sorry to all the students watching out there, but I will speak for myself, though I know I'm not alone in this, that for a lot of school boards, there is a disconnect between a board member or a collective board and their superintendent. And originally, a lot of the things that I wanted to do, I did not know at the time, but is actually under the superintendent's purview, not the board's purview, which I know is a common thing that happens. And so I don't know if you hear this question a lot or never at all, but what can we as board members do to work better with our superintendent? Because I know that although many different boards might be at odds with one another, we're all looking to aid our school systems. So whatever advice you have to be able to do that better is welcome.
Absolutely. I've worked for many different types of boards back in Texas and in Los Angeles. And Kevin can tell you he's gone through some of these experiences. One of my non-negotiables with this board was when I came on board is you will do retreats with me throughout the year, and we will come together and we will focus on various topics, on how we communicate with each other. What do you expect of me and my team? And what's the turnaround time? If you have an inquiry, what's the best way to go about it? Do you just go and reach out to one of my staff members, or do you, go through the board office? When we talk about, when we have an agenda in the board item and we all agree on the agenda, do we break from it? So those norms, those protocols, those shared values are important. So one of the things I did early on with the board, and Kevin can tell you this, is how do we communicate with one another? It sounds simple, but no, it's not. Like, it's important to me. Like, do you want, like, for example, one of the things I've committed is with my board members, I have a monthly one-on-one with each one individually. And so it's a 30-minute check-in. It could be a lunch. It's just us to talk about either the future agenda or what's on your mind, or we could just talk about something else, and just to build, get more close as a governance team between the superintendent and the board. And so we did that first, and then we're beginning to do a series of retreats and workshops to begin to come together around our strategic plan. So one of the next things we committed to is we need to engage. We need to engage, and it needs to be the board and the superintendent. So, Kevin's, I'm doing one with him here to kick it off. I'm going to do one with our teacher. I'm going to do one with our parent. I'm going to do others. So, but the advice I would give you is you can't hold each other accountable to something if you haven't uncovered what you want to hold each other accountable to. You got to say the thing. So and you got to have protocols for how you communicate with one another. So I would say that. And if you've never done that and you just took it for granted, well, you need to reset and come back and do that. And I always bring a third-party facilitator to do that as well. It has to be someone neutral. Yeah.
Got it. Thank you so much for your response, Mr. Chaudhry, and thank you so much to the participants who came out today.
Can I ask my last question then of the day? Yeah, my last question, and this is for everyone. We're doing okay on time. So I get to give out grants. I get to, do many different things, set policy, right? Intervene, give guidance, give mandates, and give grant making, convene, do a lot of different things. So grant making is one of the biggest things the department does. So here's a scenario for you. If I were to give you a $1 million grant, this is pretend, just so you know, and it's not literal. But if I were to, but I might give your school district, and your school systems always get, different grants. But if I were to give you a $1 million grant, and what would you invest it in? What kind of program would you invest it in your school system? So, here's $1 million. You get to design a program to basically make the case for something. What would it be and why? And so, and what won't be pretend is if I hear something just, wow, like I haven't been thinking about that, or that sounds better, it may come true. I'm not playing around about that. And so, and don't worry, I'll give you credit and I'll say who I got it from. This is all recorded. But if I give you $1 million grant to start a program or initiative in your school system, what would you invest it in? Who wants to go first? Okay, we see, who do you see first? I can't see everyone right now. Oh, there you go, Tanish.
Sure. So, I would definitely say mental health. I know I said this earlier, but we have like a huge problem with underfunding mental health. Like a teacher testified, they said there was one counselor for 100 students, and she was part-time, and she was supposed to go to 2 schools, and that was literally her entire job. And she could barely manage it. And we just need more counselors. We need more social workers. We need more school psychiatrists. We need more school psychologists. It's a huge problem. Our county commissioners pay maintenance of effort. I think they've paid consecutive for like 6 years straight. Like we are getting zero help whatsoever. All of our teacher raises come from grants. I think last year or 2 years ago, like Hogan gave some sort of grant, and that's how they got a raise. Last year, it wasn't even a raise. It was just a bonus. Like we are barely struggling, and mental health is always on the bottom of the list. And we need grants specifically for mental health to tell our school system that we need to invest these into mental health.
So if you got $1 million grant, you would the tangible thing you would do is purchase more social workers, psychologists, and such. Got
Yeah.
it. Okay. Who are you calling on next? Are you calling on someone? It's on you to call on the last person who.
Sorry, Hannah.
Okay.
Yeah, so coming out of the pandemic, I know our district and likely all of the districts in Maryland have been looking at student achievement data and disparities between different focus groups, specifically Black and Brown and other students of color. And one thing that I think would really help the performance of students of color is having more staff that look like them, who speak the same language as them, who share the same cultural background as them. Montgomery County in particular, you look at like the top 10 most diverse cities in the United States, and we have like 3 of those spots. And yet you look at our staff, our teaching staff in particular, and it's pushing 75% white. And I think if we want to make sure that our students of color have the same levels of achievement as their white counterparts, that's something we need to invest in, particularly staff retainment, not recruitment, but retainment is what I would invest in.
So you would invest in a retention initiative to
Yes.
retain the existing diverse staff you have.
Yes.
Got it. Okay. Who are you calling on?
Ian.
Thank you. So $1 million is a lot of money, but Charles County way back in the day got really big into this thing called open design for our classrooms. And we built tons and tons of schools that have these open classrooms where there's walls that have wheels and you can say something, you can throw a paper airplane and hit someone in the other class. And the issue is we realize now that was a mistake. And we're going back and trying to fix these schools that were built on a best practice that has turned out to be a terrible practice. And I was at a school today, Picklewaxon Middle School. I'll give them a shout out. And I was standing in their lunchroom and I could see students reading in the library. I could shout to them and they would turn around and see me. Let that sink in for a second. Do you know how loud a lunchroom is? There's no way those students in the library are able to focus. And so my priority would be giving walls to every classroom and renovating our facilities, specifically the ones built with an open design concept.
$1 million towards walls in every classroom. I don't think you'll get to every wall with $1 million. Construction costs are up there, but I appreciate the tangible of what you would tackle. Good to know. Who are you calling on?
Christian.
Thank you. I would create an extracurricular campaign in BCPS because I feel like I said this earlier. All of these issues that we have that students are interested in, I feel like in Baltimore County we don't have any sort of like person to oversee all of that. We don't have anyone who's constantly seeking that student voice and constantly learning for that, or trying to hear from students, except for me at times. And so I'd really love to see us having a huge shift in our extracurricular activities, to have more advocacy groups in our schools, led by students, organized by students fighting for what they believe in, whether that is the walls in our schools or mental health in our classes or pretty much anything. So it would be a huge extracurricular program, spending all that funding to
So
get
you would launch an Office of Student Engagement with $1 million, something like that. Got it. Okay. Who are you calling on?
Oh, I'm sorry, Boomy.
So this question's really hard because $1 million is a lot, but it's also not a lot in the world of education. So usually I would say something like activity buses or like I think someone else said, mental health. But I think I'm going to draw inspiration from things that have already occurred in my county. So years ago, a private donor in our South County district donated, I don't know how much money, but he donated enough money so that a college and Readiness Career Center could be open at Southern High School. So instead of having counselors who often have 300, 400, what have you, kids on their caseload, there were, I think, a number of employees who are dedicated to helping students get ready for college. So they have that center at that school. That's also been replicated at Severna Park High School, but we have 13 different high schools that are not those two. So you have a lot of students who the only people they can go to for help with college are their counselors, who have to deal with 4 other grades and a plethora of other concerns. And almost all of us here, there are a couple juniors, but almost all of us here are applying to college. And even with the support systems that we have, it is very, very difficult, from completing the FAFSA, CSS profile, learning how to write a resume. I mean, it's ridiculous. And so with $1 million, I would like to basically treat the state board like a private donor and allow it to open up different career centers at different schools, so that kids who are going to trade school, vocational schools, or college plans, whether that's 2-year or 4-year, have someone that their entire job is dedicated to getting them ready for that next step, not just a decision on an itemized list of different things that particular employee, like a counselor, would have to do on that day.
Got it. So a dedicated space that's called like the College and Career Center, built into every high school, or that's what you would invest in your $1 million in.
Right.
Got it. Okay. Who are you calling on?
Macy.
I really like what Boomy was saying. I really like that. Mine's kind of similar. Like how we were talking about earlier, how we feel like some classes don't prepare us for our future, but some do. I represent Talbot County. So we have like CTE courses. So we have the biomed course, which is really big, and it's offered, all 4 classes are offered at our high school. And it's a pretty big course, and you learn a lot of in-depth stuff. However, there's other courses like that prepare you for your future career, such as engineering or marketing, but you have to do cross campus to another school in order to completely learn and focus on what you might want to do with your future. So going kind of off with Boomy was saying, I think it'd be really important to just implement the classes more in the high school, put more college or career related classes in the high school, instead of just your basic English and math, but also those important college classes or career related pathway classes.
Got it. Okay.
And I'll go to Emily.
Thank you, Macy. Mine's kind of similar to Hannah's, but slightly different. Carroll County does not have much of an issue with staffing retainment up until, of course, the past 2 years. Many of our teachers retire at a very late age or after many years of service, and we definitely applaud them for that. So into that, we have struggled a lot with staffing, as I'm sure many of our counties have, and it has been shown throughout the classroom, unfortunately. We have a lot of lacking of staff, whether it is teachers themselves or outside teachers. And with our recovery program in the summer, I know it was a large struggle to try and get teachers to participate in that in order to get the students the learning they needed this past summer. And additionally, the staffing issue has bled into this year, and many extracurriculars I know have either not been able to run, not been able to start up, or have struggled with events. For example, our student government for the county, due to such a shortage, we are not able to get one sub for each high school in order to host a hybrid. And Carroll County is not that large of a county, so in order for one per high school is obviously saying something that is unfortunate. So our Student Government Association is not able to hold our typical event in the winter, where we do put out our SROB applications. So obviously this is a very key event. So we're struggling to get participation for student government, but we're not able to fix the root of the problem, which is hosting the events to encourage participation. And also to that, sorry, go ahead.
No. I just want to make sure I understand what you would do the million with. You would use the million to just go find more staff, or you would use the million to do something different? What would you?
Either to find staff, whether that is through increasing the wage, because our neighboring counties do have higher wages for teachers, so that's why
Got
we often do lose teachers, is for
Got
that reason.
Got it.
Also, there's a lot of issues due to understaffing again. Teachers aren't able to stay after school as much as they used to, and the stress of teachers has increased, and unfortunately it's very difficult to decrease that stress. But if we would have more teachers available who maybe didn't have families or didn't have outside obligations, they would able to be hosting the extracurriculars or hosting tutoring hours. Again,
Got
I've
it.
had multiple clubs that have had to close, or we barely got started up because the advisor was a last minute find. Our SGA advisor was found, I think, the week before school started. So
Got it.
yeah,
No, the shortage or it's not just Carroll, it's actually being felt across our country. So, and I think it's a combination of people reassessing if they want to, still be in education, but it's also, like you said, wages too, and thinking about what that looks like in working conditions. So I appreciate you sharing that. Who are you going to call on?
Anybody else with their hand raised? Christian, do you still have your hand raised?
Oh, he already went.
Let's see.
Who hasn't
I can
gone?
get 2 million.
I think I'd like to give like input in this. I'm currently a student member on the state board, but I used to be a local local county snob too, and I know definitely like all these mental health is so important, right? But when I think about it, it's when you have those grants and you give them, you have to absorb them into the budget. Eventually, grants run out. So what I would do personally, instead of going away from that, but that's still a topic I'm interested in. But I would personally give grants to our community school organizations or activities that are based within schools and our clubs within schools, because I've seen it so often. Clubs have such great ideas and they're so passionate, but this can't do it with the fundraising they do, or they keep having to do repeated and they can't get amount of funds. But really seeing what would happen if you take $1 million, spread it across your high schools, right? Give a few thousand to each club, and seeing what they can really do, and seeing what activities they come up with, seeing what grand projects they can do. Because our student councils, our key clubs, our Black student unions, our future health professionals, they have such great ideas, and just don't have funding to sometimes execute them. So just love to see that.
Got it. I think we officially got everyone. I'm going to read what Devanshi said. She said, I wanted to say the grant should be used with expanding CTE programs to individual schools and providing grants for students who want to seek out dual enrollment programs, which is currently expensive and only a small subset of students are able to access it. So that's what she shared. Guys, thank you so much. I really appreciate you making the time. This won't be the only time, and hold me to it. Create spaces. I would like to be all over when it comes to engaging our students. And so create the spaces, right? It could be a town hall. It could be another Zoom or virtual meeting like this. Or in another platform. It could be a smaller conversation with a group of students. One of the things I want to build is a superintendent student advisory group that essentially serves as kind of my thought partners when I'm thinking through things. So I want you guys to help me put one together. But it can't be you guys. I want it to be other guys. I'll hang out with you guys too, but I want you to help me put together other folks and like a cross grade group as well too. So that way, I'm not just saying goodbye to them right away at the end of the year. And so think about that. Think about some names around that. But if you want to host the department to have a session around a specific topic, one of the things I really like to do is called design charrettes. So I like to come and put out a problem of practice, like how do we integrate mental health supports into the school day? How would you design it? What would we do? And so I just want to, because I'm constantly thinking about how to make things happen, and then what policy makes that happen, and how can I do that at 1,400 schools at scale, right? So That's why you're always going to help me say, you're going to hear me say, what does that look like? So I really appreciate you guys being able to do that and continue on. And I'm a supporter of students having full voting rights. Just know that. So I will see you next time. Thank you so much.